The morning the world changed for single father Rayhan Porter and his 7-year-old daughter Mira, the sun had risen in a quiet, pale sweep across the small town of Alderwell, turning the mist into thin silver ribbons. Rayhan had woken up with the same tightness in his chest he always felt at the end of the month, when the bills whispered harder and the part-time construction jobs grew thinner. But nothing in his tired thoughts prepared him for what they would stumble upon just an hour later, something that would test the limits of kindness, fear, hope, and the courage it takes to help a stranger when the world gives you every reason not to. It began with the sound of a faint cry, so weak that it could have easily been dismissed as a bird or the wind. Instead, that fragile sound pulled Rayhan and little Mira toward an unimaginable discovery lying on the side of a lonely daytime woodland road. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity's unseen heroes, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Chronicles. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Rayhan had taken Mira on one of their simple weekend traditions, a nature walk along an old trail near Alderwell Creek. It was daytime, calm, and clear, the kind of morning that felt untouched by trouble. The leaves moved gently, the world seemed soft, and Mira danced ahead carrying the tiny backpack her mother had stitched years before. Even though her mother had passed away when she was 5, Mira never walked without it. Rayhan always pretended not to notice, but he felt the ache every time he saw it bouncing beside her. The moment they turned a bend in the trail, the world shifted. On the ground beyond a cluster of fallen branches lay a man, a stranger, motionless yet breathing irregularly, his body twisted in a way that sparked alarm instantly. He looked to be in his mid-40s, rugged and weak, wearing clothes that were dusty and torn as if life had dragged him through places harsher than these woods. His face was pale, almost gray under the daylight, and his lips trembled as though he had been calling for help for hours but was too far gone now for his voice to rise. Fear collided with instinct inside Rayhan. For a split second, he wanted to protect Mira and pull her away, to shield her from danger. But then compassion struck him even harder. He remembered all the times he had wished anyone would have helped him when he felt like he was drowning after his wife's death. That memory pushed him forward. He slowly checked the stranger's pulse. It was faint but present. The man's breaths were shallow, scattered, almost lost. Something about the way his hand twitched made it clear he was fighting for his life. Rayhan immediately called emergency services, but the signal nearby was weak. The call dropped twice, frustration surging inside him like fire. He lifted the phone higher, moved a few steps uphill, and finally managed to get through to emergency responders. They told him an ambulance would head toward the trail entrance, but Rayhan knew that would still take time the stranger might not have. While waiting, Rayhan tore off his jacket and placed it under the man's head to stabilize him. Mira, who had grown brave in her young heart because of all the hardships she had witnessed, crouched beside them without fear. She didn't ask questions, she simply placed her small hand on the stranger's arm, as though willing warmth and strength into him. Her innocence blended with a kind of quiet maturity, something Rayhan had always admired and secretly mourned. No child should understand struggle so well. Minutes stretched painfully. The stranger struggled to open his eyes, but when he did, there was no recognition in them, only confusion, fear, and silent pleading. Rayhan forced himself to remain calm, talking softly, telling him he wasn't alone. The stranger attempted to speak, but only a whisper escaped, nothing clear enough to understand. The sunlight filtering through the trees landed across his face, revealing bruises and small cuts that hinted he had been through something violent, something recent and terrifying. When the ambulance finally arrived near the entrance, Rayhan carried the stranger, despite the weight, despite the strain, because every second mattered. Sweat soaked his shirt, his muscles shook, and his breath grew harsh, but he pushed through with a determination sharpened by empathy. Mira picked up the stranger's dropped wallet and followed closely. Inside the wallet was a folded photograph of a young boy around 12, smiling brightly beside the stranger. On the back was written, "For my son, Rowan, stay brave." Something about that simple message pierced Rayhan's heart deeply. At the hospital, chaos blurred into urgency. The doctors rushed the man, identified by his ID as Evan Reed, into the emergency room. Rayhan's body trembled with exhaustion, adrenaline still surging. He waited while Mira sat quietly in a chair beside him, holding the photograph tightly. Hours passed. No one approached them at first, no updates, no clarity. Hospitals always felt cold to Rayhan, as if emotions were meant to be checked at the door. But he stayed because something told him they weren't meant to walk away from Evan's fate. Finally, a doctor came out, her expression torn between relief and concern. She told them Evan had severe internal complications from what appeared to be a fall combined with dehydration and untreated injuries. He had been wandering the woods, disoriented, likely for days. If they hadn't found him when they did, he might not have survived the next hour. That truth struck Rehan with an overwhelming sense of gravity. Evan remained unconscious for 2 days. During that time, Rehan learned more about him through police reports and inquiries by hospital staff. Evan was not homeless, he was actually a delivery driver who had gone missing after his truck was found abandoned near a rest stop. He had reportedly been searching for his son, who had been taken by his estranged ex-partner during a custody dispute. Hearing this, Rehan felt a heaviness that reflected the weight Evan must have been carrying, perhaps the fear of losing the one person who gave his life meaning. On the 3rd day, Evan finally woke up. His voice was weak but clearer than before. Even though the nurses handled most of the conversation, he seemed drawn to Rehan and Mira, as if recognizing them from the blurry edge of consciousness. When he learned what they had done, how they had found him, helped him, stayed by him, his eyes filled with emotion so pure it needed no words. Rehan also showed him the photograph of his son that Mira had kept safe. Evan held it with trembling fingers, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. It was the first time he had looked at his son's face in weeks. Something inside Rehan softened even further at the sight. He knew the loneliness of being a father trying his best while feeling the world was stacked against him. As Evan recovered, the bond between the three of them grew naturally. Doctors suggested he remain hospitalized for at least another week, so Rehan and Mira visited him every day. They brought sandwiches, magazines, even small flowers Mira picked from the garden. Evan would listen to Rehan's stories about raising Mira alone, the balancing act of life after loss, and the weight of surviving heartbreak while trying to stay strong for a child. In return, Evan shared pieces of his own life, how he feared losing his son forever, how he had chased a trail of bad leads until exhaustion consumed him, how the woods had swallowed him before he ever realized he was in danger. He explained that when Rehan found him, he had already given up. He had accepted the possibility that he might never see his son again, and he had stopped fighting. Hearing this, Rehan felt a surge of emotion, because he had known that feeling once too, the hollow hopelessness that comes when life breaks in ways you cannot glue back together. A week later, police located Rowan, Evan's son, safe with relatives. Custody proceedings resumed legally, and while the process would take time, Evan no longer had to face it alone. Rehan offered support, guidance, and friendship, something Evan accepted with deep gratitude. No longer strangers, they had become unexpected extensions of each other's families. The town soon learned the story, how a single dad and his little girl had saved a man's life, not just physically but emotionally. People were stunned not because of the rescue, but because despite poverty, pain, and personal struggle, Rehan had chosen compassion first. That kind of kindness, people said, was rare. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps more real, emotional stories reach others who need hope before the ending. Please comment below. In the months that followed, Evan regained visitation rights to his son, and the two began rebuilding their relationship. Rehan and Mira became permanent parts of their lives. Together, they created memories born not from shared histories, but from an act of humanity that connected them forever. And sometimes, when the sunlight fell through the trees just right during their daytime walks, Rehan remembered that if he had ignored that faint cry in the woods, a man would have died alone and a boy would have lost his father forever.